Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us for this month's Solutions of Change monthly mental health moment. This month, we are revisiting the idea of emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence might sound like a strange concept, but it is something that all of us can use to assess ourselves, our behaviors, determine if they align with our values, and how those behaviors impact our relationships with others. So, let's talk about emotional intelligence and how it benefits the positive nature of our environments and our relationships. Let's get started. So, what emotional intelligence really is just our ability to recognize, control, and effectively express our emotions. And so that just means that we recognize how something makes us feel. So, if I'm in a relationship with someone and there is a certain thing that they say, or a certain behavior that they do, and it makes me uncomfortable, or it makes me angry, or it makes me sad, or it hurts my feelings, it is my responsibility as an emotionally intelligent individual to be able to say that this makes me feel this way because, without infusing that conversation with guilt or shame or negativity, because we know that when we find ourselves in those spaces that people really can't hear what it is that we're trying to say. So when I say to someone that I care about that their behavior bothers me, say something like, the way that you ignore me when you're on the phone really bothers me. Then now I'm equipped that person with information that allows them to know that this is how I feel about it. I've said my piece, I've allowed them to understand how I feel about it and why I feel that way, and I've given them the opportunity to make a change and an adjustment in their behavior. The hard part with this is that we don't know if that other person will make a change. So when we talk about being emotionally intelligent, it's about what we can do for ourselves so that we can walk away from situations knowing that our behaviors have been a representation of who it is that we're trying to be. There are a few important parts of emotional intelligence. There's self awareness, self management, and self performance. Now, there are other parts of emotional intelligence that look at the way that we interact with others and in our environment and in society as a whole. However, it's important that we start on that foundational level and we explore ourselves in order to make sure that we understand who we are and what type of person we want to be. So, in self awareness, we say that we're going to do an evaluation. I'm going to ask myself questions about what I like and what I don't like. I am going to recognize behaviors in people that make me feel uncomfortable, that make me feel happy, that make me feel connected, so that as I am going through my journey and my journey with myself and my journey in relationships, that I'm starting to recognize how to treat myself, how to treat others, and how I want to be treated. And I can effectively communicate that if I'm aware of what it is. When we talk about self management, we're talking about behaviors. We're talking about the things that exhibit themselves in our relationships, the way that we speak to each other, how we interact with each other, our physical presence, the way that we show up. And so, when we want to say that we're managing our behaviors, we have to know what acceptable behaviors are to us. And look, this doesn't mean that everybody's going to behave the same, right? It doesn't mean that my story is going to look like your story or your story is going to look like your neighbor's story. What it does mean is that you're getting in touch with yourself in a way that allows you to know how you want to behave, how you want to be perceived, how you want people to interact with you. And you've made the decision that these are the behaviors that I want in my space and in my journey and in my energy. I want to receive this type of energy from other people. And so you ask yourself, am I exhibiting that energy in a way that people are seeing it, understanding it, and reciprocating it? When we talk about self performance, we're talking about our ability to be able to manage our performance. Now, this goes directly to the idea of work. So, if you are the type of person who recognizes that your job is very important to you, that there are specific things that you need to do in order to make your self successful in your job, and you struggle with those, then that goes back into that portion of self assessment because we ask ourselves why. What can I do better for myself that will allow me to perform in the way that I like to perform? So, say that you're not an organized person and your job requires you to be very organized, and you recognize that you're trying really hard, but you're hitting your head against the wall. You have not found that thing that makes it work for you. But you recognize that there's someone else, someone who is very organized, someone who seems to have things together in a way that you would like to. When you are emotionally intelligent, you begin to say that it's okay for me to ask for help in places that I feel like I can improve. And so maybe that means having a conversation. Maybe that means watching other people's behaviors and learning in that way. But what it is that we've decided that we want our performance to improve, and we are making steps in the direction of that improvement. These are all important parts of emotional intelligence, and we can think about a lot of things that go into it. There are a few important concepts in emotional intelligence. The first is self reflection. In self reflection, we do an assessment of ourselves and we determine what our strengths and limitations are. In the process of determining what our strengths and limitations are, we'll recognize how we utilize them interacting with ourselves and interacting with others. When I say interacting with ourselves, it's important for us to recognize that we have a lot of power in the way that we talk to ourselves, in those messages that we're giving ourselves. And this is a part of self talk. And so when we are practicing positive self talk and reminding ourselves that maybe everything's not perfect, but you are strong enough to be resilient in a situation that is difficult. Reminding yourself that you are a good communicator, that you do think of others, that you do think well of yourself, and you put your best foot forward. And if you try and you fail, that you can try again. Some of these positive messages that we can tell ourselves can motivate us to move forward in our journey. On the other side of that, some of the limitations could be the negative messages that we tell ourselves. Now, maybe it's not something that we made up in our head. Maybe it's something that someone told us along the line, that we're not good enough, that we're not strong enough, that we are weak and we need help all the time, that there are things about us that are unredeeming qualities. So sometimes that negative self talk also influences us in the way that we think we can manage our journey forward. So if I've always been told that I'm weak, then when I'm in a situation that requires my strength, sometimes it may be difficult for me to turn off that voice that says that I'm weak. That means that there's importance in that positive self talk that convinces us before we need to use that strength that we're already strong. It's important that you think before you speak and you act. If you say something, and sometimes the first thing that comes to our head is not the right thing, but a lot of us have issues when it comes to monitoring and filtering that. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to be yourself, but it does mean that you have to assess what the consequences and the impact of what you say and how you behave are. You want to know that if you're going to say something and behave in a certain way, that you have recognized that it's a representation of you and that you are responsible for accepting the consequences and the impact that comes along with that. And so we don't want to make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. We don't want to act because we feel a certain way and then wish we could take it back afterwards. We want to make sure that we're assessing ourselves in those moments and thinking before we speak and act. The next is embracing constructive criticism. Now, we need to be receptive to feedback. Sometimes we don't want to hear what people have to say about us when they're talking to us about us. But if they are providing some constructive criticism, which means that maybe we didn't do something to the best of our abilities, or maybe they see an opportunity to impart some information on us that can help us improve or reach a goal that we have, it's important that we're listening for that constructive criticism. Sometimes we're listening to what's negative in the comment and we're missing what the constructive criticism is that can help us make adjustments in the way that we move forward and how we succeed in what it is that we're trying to do. The next is to know what you value and be in line with that. So, a lot of us will say that we value honesty, respect, connection, relationship, that we value intelligence. We'll say that we value a lot of things, faith, hope, and all those amazing things that we value. But then we will assess ourselves and recognize that the things that we value are not the way that we're showing up. And so, if I tell someone that I value honesty or that I value respect, and I am not being respectful or honest in my communication with them, then I can't have the expectation that that person is going to, in turn, for some reason, be honest and respectful to me. So, when we're thinking about our values, we're thinking about what are they? What is it that I value in this life? Do I value my family? Do I value honesty? Do I value relationships? Do I value the people? What is it that I value? And is my life a representation of what I value? Now, look, it's not always going to be perfect. You're not always going to find yourself being the most respectful person or the most honest person or the most above board person. But the goal is that when you recognize that those things are important to you, that the effort that you make is to be in line with those, especially if you are requesting that same type of treatment, behavior, you have treatment and behavior from others, and you have the expectation that if they don't behave in that way, that it is their fault that things aren't right or that they have to take accountability when you are having difficulty taking accountability yourself. It's important for us to manage our values in a way that says, this is how I want my life to live, and these are the adjustments that I'm willing to make to show up as that person that I said I want to be. Another important part of emotional intelligence is praising and rewarding yourself and others. So, when we were in elementary school, our teacher would say, everybody did a good job. Give yourself a pat on the back. And we would be like, oh, I did a good job. I did a good job. What happened to patting yourself on the back in adulthood, telling yourself that you did a good job? Now, listen, a lot of times we have a tendency to focus on what we do wrong, right? That we've made a mistake, that there's something wrong. But it's just as important, even more important, to focus on when we do something right, so that we can recognize that those behaviors are in line with who we're trying to be. And whether it's our successes in our relationships or our successes in ourselves or our successes professionally or educationally, it's important that we are giving ourselves a space to celebrate ourselves in a positive way. The other thing is recognizing when someone else has done something good. It does not take anything from you to say to someone else that they did a good job. It could change their day, it can change their life, it can change their momentum. If you recognize that someone is doing a good job or has done something good, don't forget to tell them. And in turn, that teaches them how to treat you. And so if you're telling them that they did a good job, then maybe they'll recognize that, oh, hey, that was nice. So let me tell them when they do a good job. Or let me tell the next person when they do a good job. It creates a chain event of us recognizing the things that we do good, because we're always reminded of the things that we do bad or the mistakes that we make. That is something that just comes along with life, right? It's easy for people to recognize when we make a mistake. Now, some people are more graceful about it and they will look to assist you, and some people will look to point it out. And so when you have that happening on the negative side, it's important that you're replacing that in that space something positive. So let's remember to praise and reward ourselves and others. There are a lot more concepts to explore in emotional intelligence, and I hope you'll join me on September the 30th from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. to continue the conversation about emotional intelligence. I'm going to leave you with this one last concept, and that is the courage to apologize. When we have the courage to apologize, we recognize that we've made a mistake, which we all do. Nobody's perfect. When we recognize that we make a mistake and have the courage to apologize, it means that the relationship that we have with whoever that is that we're apologizing to is more important than our ego. It means that we have assessed ourselves in a human moment and been able to say, yeah, that was wrong. I probably shouldn't have said that, or maybe I shouldn't have did that. And recognize that it's okay to apologize, and apologize in a way that lets the other person know that they're important to us. So thank you for joining me for this snippet of what emotional intelligence is. And again, I hope to see you on September the 30th via Zoom from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. for our Solutions of Change monthly mental health moment open group forum.